there's so many parallels between Mormonism and Islam. It's just kind of uncanny. It's like the same spirit or something, because you'll notice, like, just like Islam, right? Joseph Smith says, the Bible's true, but only when it agrees with the Book of Mormon, you see, because it was corrupted. I'm here to purify and fix everything. So, and I can prove it with the Bible when the Bible agrees with my book. I mean, it's really low tier type stuff, but you'll notice how many people fall for, I mean, that's an obvious fallacy, right? Like, that's obviously ridiculous. You gotta unmute.
Hey, what's going on, Jay?
Yes, sir.
I'm new to the whole, like, I'm a lifelong Christian, but I've recently, last year or so, been getting into the Muslim and Islam debate with them. I'm just wondering, has there ever been a full breakdown of how similar Islam works to, like, how a cult would work? Like, that's all I can see is, like, how much it resembles a cult. The way, the tactics they use to, like, almost trick these, like, people into believing complete nonsense. Like, just the fact alone, it was written 600 years after the Bible, and they have to use the Bible in order to, like, justify the Quran. Like, that is complete takeover, like a cult takeover to me. Is there any comparisons been done?
That's a good question. Probably Sam Shamoon has somewhere covered how it's like a cult, because he does a lot of analysis of pointing out how it's, pagan, has roots in paganism, even though it pretends to be this sort of pure monotheism. Sam has a video called Exposing the Islamic Cult, so maybe that video covers it. But I mean, somebody should do a parallel comparison with Mormonism too, because there's so many parallels between Mormonism and Islam. It's just kind of uncanny. It's like the same spirit or something, because you'll notice, like, just like Islam, right? Joseph Smith says, the Bible's true, but only when it agrees with the Book of Mormon, you see, because it was corrupted. I'm here to purify and fix everything. So, and I can prove it with the Bible when the Bible agrees with my book. I mean, it's really low tier type stuff, but you'll notice how many people fall for, I mean, that's an obvious fallacy, right? Like, that's obviously ridiculous. But,
Right.
but yeah, you're right. I don't know of a specific breakdown. Like, I'm sure there is somebody who does that.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, just because, like you said, like, it's so simply provable that it's wrong. Like, it's just, like, they seem like almost, like I say, like, politician talking points. Like, they just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over, and, like, they just never can. I don't know. It might be due to the inbreeding. Like, with all due respect, I feel like that is a major problem with why they're stuck in kind of this perpetual cycle.
Somebody says, Apostate Prophet did a video called Mormonism and Islam, which compares them. And then somebody said David Wood has a video about Islam as a cult. So you might want to check those out. But yeah, I think you're right to.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's other approaches here.
Hey, Jay. Just have a couple of quick things I want to throw at you. So in debating Muslims, a lot of the time you'll hear Bible is corrupt, Bible is corrupt. And, they will never specify what that actually means, because that's quite an extraordinary claim. You'll have to say who corrupted it, when was it corrupted,
right,
at what point, right? You'll never hear this. But the one consistent theme that I do seem to hear is this idea of, quote, Pauline Christianity. And I did a little research into it, and I guess the claim is that, since Paul was not one of the original 12 apostles and claimed to see Jesus in a vision after his death, that this wasn't of divine origins, that they claim it might have not been of divine origins. And
well, when the Quran's in 355, when the Quran touts, this is Sam Shamoon's point, when it says that your followers will be exalted above the disbelievers, there's no specification that, except for Paul. It just says your followers will be exalted above the disbelievers.
Right. But as they say, since so many of the books of the New Testament are from Paul and people that followed Paul, yet he was not one of the original 12 apostles. So it's not like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Well, I mean, that's how do they get to set up the arbitrary criterion of whether Paul's like? Do I get to say? I mean, they're not going to listen to me when I say, "Oh, but Muhammad is not a prophet because of our criterion." So they're taking their arbitrary criterion and saying that only these people are the prophets. But it says who? It says you. Well, why do you get to say what the criteria of prophet is? You're not going to accept my criterion and debate as to what Muhammad's prophet status is. So that's a silly argument. I mean, it's arbitrary. How do we know that only the people that were in the direct presence of Christ are considered apostles?
Exactly. And I'd also say that, to strengthen that claim, although it isn't strong anyway, you would have to, it would make sense if Paul was preaching things that Jesus himself did not preach, when you actually find that Paul is perfectly in line with what the church teaches and what Christ taught during his ministry. So
yeah, absolutely.
If he was someone who was trying to dissuade Christians or pervert Christianity, he was doing an awful bad job at it.
I would be interested in the origin, because again, in Quran 355, there's nothing here that says only the originals and not Paul. Like, if that, like, where does this argument originate? Is it a hadith? I don't know. I'm asking, like, maybe there's some hadith where somebody says, "Oh, Paul corrupted this." This sounds, again, I mean, my suspicion is that's just another place where they arbitrarily pick higher critical scholarship to say, "Oh, this proves the Quran," when it's a double standard because they don't ever listen to any of the higher critics that talk about the Quran being ridiculous.
Right. And one last thing I just wanted to say, I think a new vector of attack, you might want to explore is this idea that Muslims presuppose that Muhammad was an illiterate Bedouin, right? The assumption being is that the revelations must be divine because he simply could not have come up with that all on his own. In his life, it was known that Muhammad was prominent in Mecca, and he supposedly traveled hundreds of kilometers to Medina. He led armies. He was a merchant. He was a trader, and so on. For all these things, it requires some knowledge. Warfare requires planning, supplies, logistics, and merchantry and trading sort of requires a knowledge of math, arithmetic, bookkeeping, and things like that. So I think maybe there was some embellishment over the years by Muslims to strengthen the claims of his divine revelations by emphasizing that, he was just an illiterate desert dweller, to try and make what he was saying seem more unique. But not only that, it's not the fact that he couldn't read or write. Like, that's not an extraordinary claim, because a lot of people in this time everywhere in the world could not read or write. A lot of people were illiterate, but that doesn't mean that he could not speak and listen. And it's very likely that he simply regurgitated certain Bible stories.
No, I mean, it's a perfect explanation for why he jumbled up and misunderstood basic things that are in the scriptures.
Yeah. Just like how he mentions in the Quran that the Trinity is Jesus, Allah, and Mary, or the passage that talks about Jesus speaking in the cradle, professing his divinity. This is stuff that is a blatant ripoff of Syriac infancy gospels that were rejected as forgeries and Gnostic nonsense by the church.
Absolutely. And the Gabriel Said Reynolds book has 10 key examples of biblical stories that the Quran jumbles up and mixes up and confuses.
What book was that, sorry?
Gabriel Said Reynolds. I cited it in my Daniel Hakikachu debate. It's a famous book on 10 or 15 examples of notorious cases where the Quran completely misunderstands and jumbles up the older Torah biblical narratives.
Okay, I'll check it out. That's all I got. Thanks, Jay.
It's weird because, clearly some of these things are from the Talmud, the Seven Sleepers of Ephesus, the Testament of Abraham. They're from these Gnostic, Talmudic, and pseudepigraphical texts. And what we're supposed to believe, no, actually it's not. They're actually divinely revealed. Remember the guys who called in the other day saying, yeah, the Quran teaches Neoplatonism, but that has nothing to do with Plato and Plotinus. So my assessment, as we were discussing the other day in one of my chat groups, I think that if you really want to understand what Islam is, it is a conglomeration of Arian and Nestorian Christianity Arab pagan elements, the Talmud, pseudepigraphical and Gnostic texts, and I think, and elements of Greek philosophy. So they'll actually act like atomism. Greek atomism is not from the Greeks, it's in the Quran. Allah revealed atomism. Even though it's centuries, or are you noticing a pattern here? So the stuff that's in the books centuries earlier is from the Quran. And that's why the Quran has to come and fix the mistakes from all the stuff that came before.